Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Welcome back to the World Builder's Anvil. My name is Jeff Ingram. And let's get right into the cosmos. The cosmos is a very important thing in any fantasy setting, even though your readers and players might not think much about it. Unless, of course, you're in a science fiction setting where there's space travel involved. Maybe you're traveling to other planets in your solar system or traveling to other planets far, far away. In that case, you're going to focus a lot on the cosmos in many different areas. However, even if you're playing the most basic tribal societies in a fantasy world or in any kind of realm, the cosmos matters. And the question is why? Especially on planets like Earth, where you rotate around the sun, which all planets are probably going to rotate around the sun, and that tilts on the axis, the seasons are created by the exact distance you are. There are some points where the Earth is slightly closer to the sun, and there are times when it's slightly farther away. That matters. It helps dictate summer and winter. And also the way you tilt from the sun. So if the Earth's tilted away from the sun, you get less direct sunlight hitting into your planet. And if you're pointed towards the sun, it's going directly from the sun through the atmosphere right onto the ground. If you look at someplace like the Sahara Desert, that's an example of where during the summer, the sun is basically directly hitting a relatively dry spot on Earth, creates this big, massive desert in North Africa. So the sun's very important. The color of the sun can be very important because that usually indicates the size of the sun. The larger the sun is, it will even get to the point where it's unstable, and that could create from some interesting but maybe short-lived fantasy stories. The other thing that's important about the sun is it is the basic form of energy for life, whether it's plants that feed on sunlight directly by absorbing it into their leaves, or if it's animals who breathe oxygen, which is essentially excreted from the plants when it's done eating. And then the carbon dioxide and the light go back in to feed the plants. So it's a basic fundamental ecosystem that's very important. Plants feed on sun and carbon dioxide. Animals breathe in oxygen and use the sun too. Think about how cold it would be without the sun. We don't have life as we know it without sun. It's not saying you couldn't come up with that or that story. However, it's definitely not Earth-like at that point. The next fundamentally important thing is your planet. Where does it exist in context to your sun? The time it takes to revolve around the sun is called a solar year. A solar year is very important because that indicates the length of time it takes for all of the seasons to occur on your planet. And that time means something to early cultures because you've gone, if you're in summer, a solar year later, you're in summer again. If you're right before winter, it'll take about a solar year to get around where the bad weather comes again. It allows you to know when to plant your crops, when to harvest your crops, when's the best time to hunt, when's the best time to gather, when are the more dangerous times. Even if you don't have the seasons as we know it, let's say you live more around the equator on Earth, you still have monsoon seasons, and these are indicated by the coming and going of the season. Plant your crops during winter, you get nothing, you lose your result potentially. Or it takes too long to get more food grown. So the seasons are very important, and that plays a little bit into weather. And seasons and weather can make a culture very, very tough, or not tough at all, because their life's too easy. And when they run into a tough culture, how do they deal with it? And then you have other planets. And when we talk about other planets, it really means, from the context of the societies you're dealing with, how far out they can see. For a long time, you only see the planets that you can see with naked eyes. I believe Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, maybe Saturn. There are a few planets we can see with the naked eye. And you can distinguish them from stars because they don't twinkle. That could be meaningful to different cultures on your planet. Moons revolve around your planet. They help create tidal forces. And a lot of times, cultures actually look more to the moon than to the sun to tell them things. If the moon has one new moon every cycle, once a day, that tells you basically what once a day is because you'll see the moon at its zenith and the sun at its zenith. And that helps break down time in increments smaller than a day before you get clocks. Some societies, like if it's very hot, they might actually abhor the sun and only go out during the night. And the moon would be a much more important thing to them than the sun would. Then the other thing that gets missed a lot are what are the small events? And something that made me think about it was there was a green comet that could be seen from Earth on Christmas Day. What would it mean to, especially like a primitive society, seeing the strange green glow in the sky that isn't normally there on a holy day? Now, Christmas is obviously originally a holy day, and for some people it's still very religious. For other people, it's more of a secular holiday. Other people are offended by it at this point, but that's indifferent. But if you go back in time to when religion dominated everything, because religion helped answer the questions that let you survive. So it was more important than even being saved might be, at least in the short term. So comets are something, especially how close they come, they're very erratic. Halley's Comet orbits way out into the Oort cloud and then comes back around the sun once every 76 years. And it really gets a little smaller all the time, so at some point in theory it won't be there anymore. Or at least we won't be able to see it. It'll melt and not really come back around from the sun. Who knows how long that'll be? I have no clue. But comets are a good one. Meteors and asteroids that can be seen. Now the difference between the two is really a meteor is once it hits the atmosphere, it starts to burn up and you see the falling star in the sky. That's a meteor. It's the same thing as an asteroid, but asteroids are actually outside of the atmosphere. But if they're big enough, you might be able to see them. That would probably be bad because it's either a near miss on your planet or you're close to some asteroids in space and maybe at some point there's an impact and you go over the consequences to the world with the impact from a big comet. It probably wouldn't be good, but you'd really want to probably research that one. Stars, obviously, those little things that twinkle out in the sky. Those can be very important. Depending on the way your planet revolves, you're probably going to have a north kind of star that people can tell what north is at nighttime if the skies are clear. And something in the southern hemisphere, if it's positioned around the night sky, could actually also do the same thing. There will tend to be a similar motion of stars throughout the year as the planet revolves around the sun. You'll see different stars at different times. That could lead to things like astrology or other types of things that mean something to a specific culture. Maybe it's a battle between two gods that happens once every year, and it's two constellations moving across the system. But it leads to stories, it leads to details that enrich your world for the people who interact with it. Now, galaxies, to me, are probably going to be very similar to stars. Now, I don't know how good you could tell a galaxy apart from a star with the naked eye, but maybe with magic or, different kinds of technology, it becomes apparent that you're looking at something that is not a star anymore. And that could have some meaning to your societies as well. And nebulas, those big gassy, glowy things that are off in the distance, maybe one's closer so you can actually see it maybe faintly during the day, or maybe not at all. There's some argument the closer you get, the light will be dispersed more and you probably won't be able to see it the closer you are, or if you're in the middle of it, you won't know it's there at all. But, I think it's one of those things you can take artistic license on. Now, if you're doing hardcore science fiction, you're going to be rated for it, so you better have a good theoretical explanation if you're going to go the route to have some really kind of cool anomaly that's out there, especially if it shows at an inappropriate time. And your galaxy, if you go out at nighttime, if the sky's clear enough and you don't have too much light pollution, you can see a white band that goes through the sky. I believe the Greeks thought that was the river Styx. I could be wrong. They thought it was an outer plain river, though. I could be wrong with that. I'm not as up on my Greek mythology as I should be. I'm more up on my mythology. The idea is you have this big, looks like white band that kind of flows through space. What does that mean to the cultures on your world? And really all that is it's a band of a galaxy, the galaxy that we're in. That's a band of the Milky Way galaxy that we can see from where we're positioned. And so it's going to be meaningful to them, probably not to the same significance as the sun or the moons, or maybe even the planets, but those are decisions you have to make based off of the cultural inputs. The weather, and not so much the weather onside the planet, because that's really more of the physical geography we'll go into when we talk about land masses. But weather is affected by the cosmos, the amount of solar flares. The more activity the sun has, the hotter planets around it will be. If they die off, if the number of solar flares goes away for a period of time, it can lead to an ice age or a mini ice age. Like, I believe the last one of the mini ice ages that happened ended sometime after America formed, started sometime in the Middle Ages, so it was several hundred years. But those things have consequences. There's an argument that people pushed west to the New World, not just for religious freedom, but because the climate in Europe was kind of crappy because of the mini ice age. And then they started on the East Coast and started pushing west in America because of this mini ice age. It was another encouragement to take a risk, to break from your everyday comforts and survival, to try and find a better life for yourself, because the times just weren't as good because of the weather caused by the cosmos. Now, the rating for this episode is, I'm going to call it basic. I don't think everyone necessarily gets into this, so maybe it's slightly higher, maybe it's intermediate for you. But I think it's an important thing. If you really want to have a rich detail to your society, you have to know your stars. You have to know your planets. And I know I've said this in a couple of previous episodes, not quite as much, but it is extremely important to really enrich your culture because it gives you something to think about. Like, what would they think about those two planets that are huge? Maybe instead of Jupiter, it's slightly bigger and it's turned into a brown dwarf star, so it slightly glows day or night. It wouldn't be as bright as a sun like ours, but it would still have some light being given off from it. Closer to the red, I think, in the infrared, so maybe only certain races can see it. I'm not exactly sure on the science of that. There's a good website to go check out, and I'll mention that in a second, for the science stuff behind solar systems. And he'll probably get into more detail than that at some point too, but it's a YouTube channel worth checking out. The world building task for the day is I want you to go visit 3 things. One is a NASA site that puts you into context to the known universe. Now, that's not to say the universe isn't bigger than what we know. It probably is. However, we can only see as far as light can travel. So if the Earth has been around for, I think they say 13 or 15 trillion years or something like that, only those number of years can light travel back to us from a far out light source. So it's a little bit bigger. We just can't see that far because we can only see as far as the light has traveled. There is another site from David Reiki who talks about things that you can see without a telescope. That's kind of where I got my little list of things from because I think it covered them pretty well. But these are things that you can see without a telescope. It's just to help reinforce that. And the last one is a YouTube channel called Arxvedian, I believe. Great world builder. He does it from a sense of wanting to learn, which I think is awesome. But he really kind of goes into the science of it. It's good stuff to listen to and watch, to at least get your brain to think over it once. No matter how scientific you want to get, your brain should think over it once to kind of know, where should my planet be? The science right now is changing with a lot of this stuff. So don't be too fixed to making it be exactly like our solar system is. But understand the more you deviate from our solar system, the less explainable it is to have Earth-like conditions. And if you don't want Earth-like conditions, that's great. Have fun. If you want Earth-like conditions, it's going to be kind of tough to break from the model of our solar system, I think. But that's just my opinion. Now, the real world task for the day is sit under the stars with your loved one or a friend. It really doesn't need to be your loved one, but I like to go there first because, she's the person who helps give me the time to do this stuff. So go sit under the stars and talk about the universe and maybe make up some stories with her as you're sitting there looking. And you can even kind of cheat and make this a world building task too, where you're making up stories about constellations that you're going to have in your universe. And just tell them to the person. Just have some fun with it. Make it interactive. Let them tell a story or give you feedback. Now, the tease for this next upcoming episode will be planet-side geography. This is a little bit more meaningful to everyone because no matter what kind of campaign you're working with, you're probably going to deal with planets at some time. And if you're someone like me who focuses heavily on one world setting, then this is really the basics for building the structure of your world. And as always, make sure to go to gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com for the show notes. It'll be under podcasting, World Builders Anvil. That's a great place to get all of the information from the episode that you've just listened to and to see all the resources that we've talked about in this episode. Thanks for joining us this episode of the World Builders Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at Gardul.com to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike while the myth rolls high.